So which team might be interested in a big, toolsy center prospect with plus skating ability and plus shooting ability? Well, I would guess a lot of teams. Cayden Lindstrom, in my mind, is very much in the mix, if not the favorite, to be the first center taken in the 2024 NHL Draft after, of course, projected number 1 overall pick, Macklin Celebrini. So what's so exciting about Cayden Lindstrom? Well, we could talk about his offensive ability. We could talk about his shot. We could talk about his skating. But let's be honest. The thing that probably excites NHL scouts the most is that he's 6'4", he's over 210 pounds, and let me tell you, he plays like he's that big. Now, Lindstrom did battle injuries this season. He broke his hand, he dealt with some back issues, he did return for the playoffs after missing a significant amount of time for his team Medicine Hat in the WHL, but when he returned for the playoffs, he didn't quite look like his best self. But when he did play this season, and when he was close to or at 100%, he flashed legitimate high-end potential as a center prospect. Look, Cayden Lindstrom obviously has offensive skill. He scored 28 goals in 34 games across the regular season and the playoffs for Medicine Hat this season in the WHL. He was on a 90-plus point pace before injury shortened his season. So the offensive talent, the scoring ability, that's there. That's undeniable. But the really exciting part of his game, to be sure, is the fact that he has that offensive skill. He has that skating ability. He has that goal-scoring potential. But it's in the package of a potentially physically dominant forward. And really, when it comes to Lindstrom, it's all the physical tools. He has the breakaway gear. He isn't afraid to attack the high-danger areas. He's not afraid to use his body and lay hits on the opposition, both in the offensive zone on the forecheck and the defensive zone when he's playing defense. His shot, it's an overpowering shot. There's a reason why he was almost goal per game this season in the WHL. In other words, Lindstrom's plausible upside, it's huge. It's no shock at all that the NHL scouts are really, really high on Cayden Lindstrom. Now, we'll get into his specific weaknesses in a little bit, but to be sure, Cayden Lindstrom doesn't come without risk. The thing is that the upside, the plausible upside for Cayden Lindstrom, it's enormous. If he hits his ceiling, we're talking about a physically dominant, goal-scoring, number 1 center with literally all the tools that you could want in an NHL forward. So let's go through Cayden Lindstrom's strengths, and there are a lot of them. At the top of the list, it's that size, speed, strength combination that he brings to the table. It's a rare thing to have all 3 of those things, to be strong on your skates and strong in the corners, to have the size to be able to take full advantage of that strength, and to have the skating ability that you're not just a bruiser. You can go around someone and you can go through them. Lindstrom is 6'4", and you look at him and you can say to yourself, he might be able to put on even more muscle, even more strength, and play to those strengths even more. But so much of playing big, it's not just about size. It's about mentality, and Cayden Lindstrom appears to have the mentality where he's not a finesse player. He's not a 6'3" player who plays like he's 5'10". He's a 6'4" player who plays like he's 6'4". He takes full advantage of his size and physicality. He goes to the dangerous areas. He lays hits on the opposition. He's a guy who is the epitome of that old hockey cliche of being tough to play against. And speaking to that whole using his size well, he flashes high-end puck protection ability, which a player with his skating ability and size should be able to flash. We're looking at a guy who could potentially be a dominant zone entry player, driving the puck through the middle of the ice and creating controlled zone entries for his team. I watch Cayden Lindstrom, and I see a guy who could potentially drive offense for his club. Then there's what he does in the offensive zone. He's got a bomb of a shot. He's got a goal scorer's mentality. This is a guy who, if he hits at the NHL level, he could be a 40-plus goal scorer easily. And really what it all boils down to in the end, Cayden Lindstrom, he's a physical specimen. He's got star-level upside. If you pick him, you are dreaming on what he could theoretically become if everything else in his game comes together in the end. That said, it's not like his game is complete. It's not like he doesn't come with risks. It's not like he doesn't have weaknesses. And the primary one I've noticed in watching Cayden Lindstrom is the playmaking ability. It's not that he's incapable of making creative passes to his teammates. It's just that it's inconsistent. It's that he'll make poor decisions with the puck when he tries to feed his teammates in dangerous areas. It's that he can be prone to turnovers, and it does make you worry a bit about the quality of his hockey IQ. Now, As a goal scorer, he takes full advantage of his physicality and his natural gifts. As a playmaker, you have to think the game at a high level. You have to have that vision and that creativity. He shows it sometimes, but he doesn't show it quite enough to make me certain that it's a core part of who he will be as an NHL player, and it's a concern. There's also a legitimate worry, and I've heard this from some scouts, I've read this in some scouting reports, that he might not stick at center. Obviously, he's a little bit more of a goal scorer rather than a playmaker. Playmakers tend to be the ones who stick at center more often. It's not to say there aren't goal-scoring centers, it's just that there are fewer of them. And he hasn't played center for all that long. This is only his second year at the position. Some scouts do worry that eventually, ultimately, he will have to move over to wing. Now, that's not to say he couldn't be a great goal-scoring wing. He sure could, but he's obviously going to be more valuable if he sticks down the middle, and not everybody believes that he will. Then there's the injury concerns. He did only play in 36 games this year across the regular season and the playoffs for his WHL club. And given the way he plays a physical game. He uses his size, he uses his strength. There's always going to be some concerns that maybe he's just going to be a guy who gets banged up a lot. There's also going to be some concerns until teams get a look at his medicals as to whether some of these back issues, potentially, the hand, probably not as much of a concern, but back issues are concerning definitely for a young teenager. The hope is that nothing comes off as a red flag in those medicals and teams are sold, but that is a risk. Finally, and this speaks to what I mentioned earlier about the concerns about his hockey IQ, his off-puck work, especially in the offensive zone, it's nothing special. It's not terrible. It's not as if he's making mistakes. It's not as if he's blowing coverages, but he's not exactly making himself a target seamlessly for passes to take full advantage of his goal-scoring ability. He'll need to get better at finding those soft spots in zones, and it does make you wonder if maybe the hockey IQ is not going to allow him to take full advantage of his immense physical tools. Now, for me, look, the concerns are real. I do worry a little bit about the playmaking. I do worry a little bit about the hockey IQ. But personally, I think he can be a play-driving presence down the middle at the NHL level. I'm high on Cayden Lindstrom. I like the upside. I see what he could theoretically become. You don't see too many players these days with his size and his willingness to use his size and to play physical. He has the potential to be that kind of unicorn prospect, that 1C physically dominant center, and I think he can stick down the middle. We'll see if it plays out. I'm not saying there aren't risks, but for me, I'd personally be comfortable taking him in the top 5, and I think there's a good chance that is where he ultimately goes in the 2024 NHL Draft.
We all silly like the mayor.